it takes me back to the notion of belief and gossip. Like the whole reason why humanity has been so successful and spread through so many continents is because of gossip. Essentially, the reason I don't have a $20 bill here, but if I held up a $20 bill, the only reason why that we all agree that it's worth $20 is because we all agree that it's worth $20. If there was a large contingent of the population said it's not worth anything, I could wipe my ass with it, but that's it. And we may get there one day. We probably are at some point with the way that fiat currency is, but
Yeah.
like you get the point, right? So if everybody in the family agrees with the rule book, then everything's going to be fine. But I think the problem that we have, like one of the issues, I was talking to a guy today on a private console. He was a very wealthy Russian immigrant, and he was asking me about some issues that he's got with his marriage and potentially having kids and stuff like that. And the notion that society, culture, Hollywood, schools, the education system, like everything out there, screens, like parents are giving kids screens at 5, 6, 7 years old now. You go to a restaurant, you sit down, they don't even parent their kids or talk to them or engage them. It's put a screen down, headphones, and they stare at it. And that's how they parent, right? So we've got all of these influences. And even if you're a good parent, you don't give your kids a screen, you put them in the school system. The school system's going to introduce rainbows, pronouns. Oh, Billy, you feel like a girl today. Let's call you Sally. No problem, right? Like, you're going to have all of these things indoctrinated into your children. So you really don't even own your own children unless you're in a small community or a compound. And people have tried that. We saw what happened with Ruby Ridge. Dude just want to go to the top of the mountain and be left alone. Government wouldn't fucking leave him alone. We saw what happened at Waco. Slightly different, scenario, but he wanted to have his little compound sort of thing going on, right? Like we see these efforts to sort of draw a perimeter around us to keep them and their influences away, and it doesn't really seem to work, right? That's why I still more or less, subscribe to the decline is real, enjoy it, right?
I just, I don't think that does anything beneficial for civilization as a whole, especially those of us with children. I got 2 young daughters, and I want to try to create at least this little
I have a daughter as well.
For sure. And I want to create for my daughter and for, children that you have a slightly better place where they could live, that it's less confused. And I think the alternative.
Yeah, but is it more important to save the world than it is to save your own inner circle? Like the people that you care about?
Well, that's what I was getting to, is like also too with the indoctrination piece is like my wife doesn't work. We're going to be homeschooling our children. We're going to create a community within our community. We're not talking about like an Amish compound. That would be ideal, of course, but I know, the state wants its hands, or the province, whatever, they want their hands in your business. To a certain degree, we have to exist within the system that has been created, as corrupt as it is, the laws and the government. And it goes back to a point that I get slammed about, is like, listen, men inherently are built for risk, and the risk is worth the reward. And this is where it goes back to proper biblical courtship too, because a lot of the failures of divorces and marriages are because men and women aren't going into marriage with a sober mind. Is that, Rich, I know I've had a degenerate past. You can't paint red flags green, bro. And so approaching the courtship process and not having sex until you're married.
Red flag. Okay, but what about the whole notion of repentance though? Like, doesn't that paint a red flag green?
No, what I mean by that is, if by engaging in premarital fornication, premarital sex, you kind of confuse yourself. So you can't actually really see the person for who they are. And I've certainly been in relationships before my wife where I was like, I thought I had this type of woman in front of me, when really I was just in a state of euphoria because I was addicted to the intimate side. And so if more men approach this with, okay, I want to really see who this woman is. I'm not going to engage in the sexual, behavior with her, really see who she is. That's going to give you that much better of a chance and a leg up going to marriage. Of course, is it perfect? No. But when you combine Christian values, following, Christ and the Bible and the church, and doing it this way, I mean, it certainly is going to lower your chances. And to me, the risk is worth the reward. If that means family. Go ahead.
Okay, I got another point over here I wanted to bring up as well. Somebody on that space said that they either...
Rich, mind if I touch on that at some point?
Yeah, go ahead, Chase. Go ahead.
So, dude, you raised so many really good points just then, particularly around the subversion of the family by all of these outside forces. Mm-hmm. And we kind of ended on a black pill of, well, the whole ship is going down. Might as well enjoy it while we can. The Christ pill for me, see, here's the thing, man.
I think the black pill is more of a nihilistic view and a hate.
Yeah, I mean, there is nihilism.
There's a lot of hate and resentment towards women and even guys that are doing shit with their life from the black pill community.
Yeah, I'm not referring necessarily to the black pill community. If that is a community, I don't know. I'm just using it colloquially, like when somebody's black pilled, like they're hopeless and
okay, okay.
I reject the nihilistic perspective, because when I look at us as men and what we were created by God to do, right? Mike obviously knows in Genesis, God commanded man to rule over and subdue and govern the earth, right? We were created to govern the earth. God uniquely equipped us to be the rulers of this world and to rule the world under God's headship. He also commanded us to be fruitful and multiply. And we're told throughout the scriptures to raise our kids in the way of the Lord. And if you do that, they won't depart from it in their old age if you do it properly. I'm big on the idea of Christian patriarchy, Rich. Like my goal for my life, what I really want to do is have as many kids as I possibly can. I want to raise them in the way of the Lord. And I want to build a legacy and a dynasty in this world where my future generations will go on to continue to spread the gospel of Christ and to work against these forces of darkness and reorder creation in the way that it's meant to be ordered, where things aren't so freaking degenerate.
What do you think the best way to do that is?
Well, I think
so many children.
What'd you say?
What do you think the best way to do that is, to have so many children to make that happen?
Why do I think, or what?
What do you think the best way to do that is? Because I mean, like the Christian, perspective seems to be one man, one woman, but there's guys out there that have multiple wives that have multiple children with them, right?
Yeah,
but you're fighting an uphill battle if you want to beat up the Muslims, because they're taking on multiple.
That's why Christians got to have more babies.
We got to have as many as
human. Man.
You got to have more wives then.
So here's the thing about that. I used to be big into this idea earlier in my 20s, Rich, after I got into the red pill. There's a lot of dudes in the sphere that were talking about polyamory or polygyny. I think polygyny is what it's called. Mm-hmm. I used to be big into that idea. And I was like, man, I never want to get married. I just want to make a ton of money and have like 10 women that I have like 3 kids with each, have like 30 kids. That sounds legit.
Yeah.
Which sounds really cool when you're like 23 years old and full of piss and vinegar. And then like the reality of life and how complicated it is starts to set in. And it's like, wow, that's very difficult to manage, right? Can you imagine managing 10 women? It sounds like a tough freaking job. And I started to look throughout the Bible. In my walk with Christ, I would read throughout the Bible, and there's patriarchs all throughout the Old Testament that would have multiple women, mm-hmm. and they would have children with multiple women. And the pattern that you notice over and over again is that departure from the one man, one woman model often creates bloodshed and strife and fighting between their kids, right? Yeah. Because you have a man who's committed to multiple women. Classic example, you've got Abraham, promised children by God, promised to be the father of nations. He decides to take matters into his own hands, and he sleeps with his wife's servant Hagar instead and has Ishmael. He does not have faith in God's promise. He has Ishmael, and then he has Isaac after the fact. Well, that sin, one of the products of that sin, the prophet Muhammad, is a descendant of Ishmael. If Abraham had not departed from God's promise and what he was supposed to do just with his one wife, we would not have a war in our current world today between Christianity and Islam. King David, King Solomon, they took multiple wives. God commanded them not to. Their children fought. They fought for the kingdom. They warred against one another. What'd you say?
Or were killed in sort of like God's wrath. King David, right before Solomon was born, right?
Yes. And I look at that.
Your model, then, if I understand it correctly, you need every guy to man up and take the Christ pill, and every woman to man up and take the Christ pill, and just start going forth and being fruitful and multiplying.
Dude, if we could create a culture, Rich, where people earnestly pursued biblical gender roles and had as many children as possible with one another and properly raised them in alignment with biblical values, if every man and woman in the West, or let's say 10% of the men and women in the West did this, and they each had 5 to 6 kids each, within 5 generations, we could fix literally everything that is going wrong in the world. Everything could be fixed if we stuck to this model. That's the most ideal scenario. Obviously, the most ideal scenario.
I mean, that would assume that the kids' worldview and belief system wouldn't be polluted by modern culture and society. Which is going to be very, very hard to do, because they seem to be winning that battle overwhelmingly.
Well, and I think that begs the question of who is pushing this degeneracy, but that's a conversation for another
Well, I mean,
podcast.
we can just look at the leaders of our respective countries, Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau. Like this is who people vote for.
Yes, but I'm speaking to something deeper. Who controls the flow of information and the flow of ideas, and where is that stream originating from? That's an interesting question. But
yeah, we don't have nearly the amount of control that we think that we do.
No, we don't.
Stuff like that.
But a man has control over his household and what the stuff that his children consume.
He does, absolutely,
to a degree, right?
And that's why, if I may just add one more thing, Rich.
Okay, I want to go to the second point after that.
Yeah, that's why strong biblical patriarchy, strong male leadership within the household, creating a strong biblical culture within the household is so important, because that bleeds down through generations. And you have to create that tradition. Raise your sons well to be biblical patriarchs. Raise your daughters well to be prepared for that role as mothers and wives. You know, like that kind of culture is so important. And it protects against degeneracy over time.
I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full-length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe over here. And pinned down below in the top comment, you'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line, books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.